The day my sister
Don't
moved
cry,
into
my
my house
love.
was the day I thought
I
I was
have to
finally
go
repaying
now,
a debt
but I
I could
promise I'll
never
be
truly
back
repay.
soon.
For years, while I worked abroad in construction camps and remote oil facilities, she had remained in our hometown, caring for our aging mother through illnesses, hospital visits, and lonely nights. Every time I called home, I heard the exhaustion in her voice, yet she never complained. So when mother passed away and my sister, Nia, struggled to keep up with rent and bills, I made a decision without hesitation. Move into my house. I told her during one of our video calls, you'll have space. You won't need to worry anymore. Her eyes filled with tears. She thanked me over and over. At that moment, I felt proud. Proud to help family. Proud to honor our mother's memory. I had no idea that decision would become the greatest mistake of my life. My house stood on the edge of town, a large property I had built over 15 years of working overseas. Every brick represented birthdays I missed, holidays spent alone, and endless months under foreign skies. It was more than a house. It was proof that sacrifice had meaning. Before leaving again for another contract, I handed Nia a set of keys. Take care of it, I said. She smiled warmly. You can trust me. For months, everything seemed normal. She sent photos of the garden. She called to tell me repairs had been completed. Neighbors occasionally mentioned seeing her maintain the property. I felt relieved. Then strange things began happening. My calls started going unanswered. Messages were returned hours later with brief explanations. When I asked about specific rooms, her answers felt vague. Small details did not add up. One evening, while I sat alone in my apartment overseas, a childhood friend called unexpectedly. His voice sounded hesitant. There's something you should know. My stomach tightened. What is it? He paused. Your house doesn't look like your house anymore. Confusion washed over me. He explained that expensive furniture had appeared. Renovations were underway. Luxury vehicles frequently parked outside. Loud parties continued late into the night. I struggled to understand. Naya barely had enough money to pay rent before moving in. How could she suddenly afford such extravagance? When I confronted her during our next call, she laughed. People exaggerate. I'm just making the place look better. Her answer felt rehearsed, yet I wanted to believe her. Family deserves trust. At least that was what I kept telling myself. Weeks later, another call arrived, this time from an elderly neighbor who had known us since childhood. Her voice trembled with concern. Your sister tells everyone she owns the house now. Silence filled my apartment. I felt as though the air had vanished from the room. What do you mean? I asked. She says you gave it to her permanently. She introduces herself as the owner. After the call ended, I sat motionless for nearly an hour. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as gossip. Another part remembered mother's favorite warning. Trust should be given with love, but protected with wisdom. For the first time, doubt entered my heart. Months passed before my contract ended. During those months, the distance felt unbearable. Every unanswered question grew larger. Every rumor felt heavier. By the time my flight home was scheduled, anxiety had replaced anticipation. I arrived without informing anyone. I wanted to surprise my sister. Instead, I received the shock myself. As my taxi approached the property, I barely recognized it. Expensive gates stood where simple fencing had once been. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Music echoed from inside. Well dressed guests moved through the yard, holding drinks and laughing loudly. For a moment, I wondered if the driver had taken me to the wrong address. But there was no mistake. This was my house. My heart pounded as I stepped through the gate. Several guests looked at me with confusion. None recognized me. Why would they? To them, I was merely a stranger interrupting a celebration. Then I saw Nia. She stood near the entrance wearing designer clothing and expensive jewelry. Her confidence startled me. This was not the struggling woman I had invited into my home. This was someone entirely different. When the eyes met mine, the color drained from her face. The smile vanished instantly. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she forced a laugh and hurried toward me. You should have called first, she whispered. Called before entering my own house, I replied. The words landed like stones. Guests began watching. Nia's expression hardened. Not here, she said quietly. She led me inside. The moment the door closed, the warmth disappeared from her voice. Why are you acting like this? She demanded. I stared around the transformed living room. Nearly everything I owned had been replaced. Family photographs were gone. Mother's portrait was missing. Even the furniture held no trace of the home I remembered. What happened here? I asked. She folded her arms. I improved things. With what money? Her jaw tightened. That's none of your business. The answer stunned me. None of my business? This was my property, my sacrifice, my home. Yet she spoke as though I were an intruder. Our argument escalated quickly. She insisted she deserved the house because she had cared for mother. She claimed my years abroad made me absent from the family. Old resentments surfaced. Accusations followed. Painful truths emerged. By the end of the confrontation, I realized something terrible. My sister no longer viewed me as family. She viewed me as an obstacle. That night, I stayed in a hotel. Sleep never came. Memories of childhood replayed endlessly. We had shared meals, dreams, and struggles. We had promised to protect one another. How had everything fallen apart? The following morning, I returned determined to understand the truth. What I discovered was far worse than rumors suggested. Documents were missing from my office. Financial records had disappeared. Several valuables inherited from our parents were nowhere to be found. Then I noticed something else. The hidden safe behind the bookshelf stood slightly ajar. My pulse quickened. Very few people knew that stuff existed. Nia was one of them. Slowly, I opened it. The shelves inside were nearly empty. Cash accumulated over years was gone. Important documents had vanished. Gold jewelry belonging to our mother had disappeared. For a moment, I could not breathe. It felt as though someone had reached into my past and stolen pieces of my life. When I confronted Nia again, she denied everything. Her denials lasted only until evidence began appearing. Bank records revealed unauthorized transactions. Witnesses described valuables being sold. Contractors admitted she had financed renovations using assets from the safe. Each discovery exposed another layer of deception. Yet, the most painful revelation arrived unexpectedly. Among the missing documents had been a sealed envelope mother left before her death. I eventually recovered a copy through her attorney. Inside was a handwritten letter. Mother spoke about family, forgiveness, and integrity. She specifically thanked Nia for her care and praised my sacrifices abroad. Then came a sentence that changed everything. She wrote that neither child should ever measure love through money or property, because greed destroys what hardship cannot. Reading those words felt like hearing her voice again. Tears blurred the page. Mother had seen the danger long before any of us. She understood how easily blessings become battles when gratitude disappears. News of the situation spread throughout town. The same people who once admired Nia's lifestyle began questioning its source. Friends distanced themselves. Invitations stopped arriving. The image she had carefully built started collapsing. Eventually, legal proceedings followed. The evidence was overwhelming. Assets were traced, transactions documented, property ownership confirmed. The truth could no longer hide behind excuses. Throughout the process, people expected me to celebrate. They expected anger, revenge, perhaps even satisfaction. Instead, I felt grief. Winning a dispute with a stranger might bring relief. Winning against your own sister feels like losing something that can never be replaced. Months later, the case concluded. The house returned fully under my control. Remaining valuables were recovered where possible. Financial restitution was ordered. On paper, justice prevailed. Yet, when I walked through the quiet halls afterward, victory felt strangely empty. The greatest theft had not been money, it had been trust. One afternoon, long after the legal battles ended, Nia appeared at the gate. She looked different. The confidence was gone. The expensive clothes had vanished. For several minutes, she stood silently before speaking. I thought I deserved everything, she admitted. At first, I only took a little. Then it became easier. Eventually, I convinced myself the house should have been mine all along. Her voice cracked. I kept justifying it until I couldn't recognize myself anymore. I listened without interrupting. Some wounds are too deep for immediate forgiveness. Some apologies arrive after irreversible damage. Yet, I also remembered Mother's words. Greed destroys what hardship cannot. Nia's punishment had already begun long before any court ruling. She had lost respect, friendships, and peace of mind. Most painfully, she had lost the trust of her own family. Before leaving, she looked toward the house one final time. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then she walked away. I do not know whether complete reconciliation will ever happen. Healing is slower than destruction. Trust takes years to build and moments to break. But I learned something important through that painful chapter. Generosity without boundaries invites exploitation. Love without wisdom becomes vulnerability. Family deserves compassion, but compassion should never require surrendering common sense. The safe my sister opened contained money, jewelry, and documents. Yet, what she truly unlocked was a chain of consequences neither of us anticipated. In chasing what was never hers, she lost far more than she gained. And in losing what I worked years to build, I discovered a truth more valuable than anything hidden behind steel doors. Character remains when possessions disappear. Integrity survives when wealth vanishes. And sooner or later, every hidden action steps into the light because the truth has a way of finding its own key. Weeks passed, but the Hannis refused to leave him. Every time he called home, something felt different. Nia's voice carried a confidence he had never heard before. She no longer sounded grateful. She sounded comfortable, too comfortable. At first, he blamed the distance. Living thousands of miles away had a way of making ordinary things seem strange. Yet the feeling persisted. Then came the first warning. An old neighbor sent him a message late one evening. The woman had known their family for decades and rarely involved herself in other people's affairs. I hope you don't mind me saying this, she wrote, but your sister has been making some unusual changes to the property. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. What kind of changes? The reply arrived almost immediately. Expensive renovations, new furniture, contractors coming and going every week. His confusion deepened. Nia had never possessed that kind of money. Even after moving into the house rent free, she still struggled financially. The explanation made no sense. When he called her the next day, she brushed the matter aside. You're worrying over nothing, she laughed. I found some good deals. That's all. But something in her tone felt rehearsed. It was not the answer itself that bothered him. It was how quickly she delivered it, as though she had already prepared for the question. A few days later, another call arrived, this time from a childhood friend. Unlike the elderly neighbor, his friend sounded genuinely uncomfortable. I don't want to get involved, he said carefully. Then don't, he replied. Just tell me what happened. Silence lingered on the line. Finally, the friend spoke. People think your sister owns the place. The words hit him harder than he expected. What do you mean? That's how she introduces herself. She tells everyone it's her house. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. His friend continued. She throws parties there, expensive parties, the kind most people around here can't afford. Whenever someone asks how she managed it, she says she earned it. After the call ended, he sat alone in his apartment overseas. Outside his window, the city lights shimmered against the darkness, but he barely noticed them. His thoughts drifted back to childhood. Nia had always hated depending on others. Even when they were young, she disliked feeling overshadowed. Their mother often reminded them that comparison was poison, but some lessons never fully took root. For the first time, he wondered whether resentment had been growing inside his sister for years. The possibility troubled him more than the rumors themselves. As weeks became months, reports continued arriving. Neighbors described luxury vehicles parked outside. Others mentioned unfamiliar guests coming and going at all hours. Some even claimed Naya referred to him as if he were permanently gone. Every story sounded more unbelievable than the last. Yet together they formed a pattern he could no longer ignore. Then came the moment everything changed. One evening, while sorting paperwork after work, he received a call from a local banker who had known their family for years. The man's voice was cautious. I thought you should be aware of something. His heart immediately sank. What happened? Your sister recently attempted to access information related to some of your financial documents. The room seemed to grow colder. What documents? I can't disclose details, but she presented herself as someone with authority over your affairs. He closed his eyes. A terrible realization began taking shape. Nia was not simply enjoying the comfort of the house. She was stepping into his identity. She was acting as though everything he owned already belonged to her. Sleep became impossible after that. Every unanswered question multiplied. Every rumor felt heavier. Every conversation replayed endlessly inside his mind. By the time his overseas contract approached its end, he had made a decision. He would return home without warning anyone. No calls, no messages, no announcements. If everything was innocent, the surprise would mean nothing. But if something was wrong, he wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. The flight felt longer than any journey he had taken before. During the hours in the air, memories flooded back. He remembered the day he first left home to work abroad. He remembered promising his mother that every sacrifice would be worth it. He remembered Nia crying at the airport, begging him not to stay away too long. Back then, they had been inseparable. Somewhere along the way, something had changed. He just did not know when. By the time the plane landed, anxiety had replaced every other emotion. He collected his luggage, stepped outside, and hired a taxi. As the vehicle moved through familiar streets, old landmarks stirred memories of simpler times. Yet, a strange feeling followed him the entire journey. It felt as though he were returning to a place he knew while simultaneously approaching something completely unfamiliar. Then the house appeared in the distance. For a moment, he thought they had taken a wrong turn. Massive gates now surrounded the property. Decorative lights lined the driveway. Expensive cars filled every available space. Music echoed through the evening air. People laughed somewhere beyond the walls. His pulse quickened. The driver slowed near the entrance. Quite a celebration, the man commented casually. He could only stare. This was not the quiet family home he remembered. This looked like the estate of someone eager to display wealth. As he stepped out of the taxi and approached the gate, a sense of dread settled over him. Whatever waited on the other side, he already knew one thing. The rumors had not been exaggerations. If anything, they had understated the truth. And somewhere inside that house stood the sister he thought he knew, preparing to face a surprise neither of them would ever forget. The moment he stepped through the gate, conversations began to fade. Guests glanced toward him with confusion. No one recognized him. To them, he was simply a stranger arriving uninvited. Then he saw Nia. She stood near the entrance wearing expensive jewelry and a designer dress, laughing with a group of guests. The moment her eyes met his, her smile disappeared. For several seconds, neither moved. Then she hurried toward him. You should have told me you are coming, she whispered nervously. He looked around at the luxury cars, the decorations, and the crowd filling his property. Why? He asked quietly. So you could prepare. She immediately led him inside before more people could hear. The house barely resembled the home he had built. Family photographs were gone. Their mother's portrait had vanished. Most of the furniture had been replaced. What happened here? He asked. I improved it, she replied. With what money? Her expression hardened. After everything I did for mother, I deserve something. The word stunned him. Deserve something. Not gratitude, not help, everything. The argument that followed exposed years of resentment he never knew existed. Nia accused him of abandoning the family while working abroad. She claimed he received all the praise while she carried the burden at home, but resentment alone could not explain the missing valuables. The next morning, he searched the house carefully. That was when he discovered the safe, hidden behind the bookshelf in his office. It was slightly open. His stomach dropped. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Nia was one of them. When he opened it, the truth stared back at him. Cash was gone. Important documents were missing. Their mother's gold jewelry had disappeared. The safe had been emptied. For a long moment, he simply stood there, unable to move. Years of sacrifice had vanished. When confronted, Naya denied everything. At first, but evidence accumulated quickly. Bank records revealed suspicious transactions. Contractors admitted they had been paid with money traced back to missing assets. Witnesses described valuables being sold. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. The woman he trusted most had stolen from him. Legal action followed. Ownership documents proved the house belonged entirely to him. Financial records exposed how renovations and luxury purchases had been funded. As the investigation expanded, Naya's carefully constructed image began collapsing. Friends disappeared. Invitations stopped. The admiration she enjoyed turned into whispers. People who once celebrated her success started asking uncomfortable questions. Eventually, there was nowhere left to hide. The court ruled in his favor. The property remained his. Some assets were recovered. Restitution was ordered. Justice had arrived. Yet victory felt hollow. The deepest wound was not financial, it was personal. Months later, after everything ended, Nia appeared at the gate. Gone were the expensive clothes and confident smile. She looked exhausted. For several moments, she stood silently before speaking. I convinced myself it belonged to me, she admitted. He said nothing. I kept taking more because every time I got away with it, it became easier. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know when I became this person. The words hung in the air. Parts of him wanted to forgive her immediately. Another part remembered every lie, every betrayal, every missing piece of their mother's legacy. Some damage cannot be repaired in a single conversation. Before leaving, Naya looked toward the house one final time. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then she walked away. He watched until she disappeared from sight. The house was finally his again. The documents had been restored. The legal battle was over. But the experience left a lesson he would never forget. Generosity without boundaries can become an invitation for exploitation. Trust is precious, but trust without wisdom is dangerous. His sister opened a safe searching for wealth. Instead, she unlocked the destruction of her own reputation, her relationships, and her peace. In the end, the money was never the greatest loss. The greatest loss was the trust that once existed between a brother and a sister. And the greatest lesson was one their mother had understood all along. Greed can destroy in months what love spent a lifetime building.